All right, so it is 9 o'clock, and we will get going here. Good morning and welcome to day two of the virtual STEM week for 2024 for CEN. We appreciate you guys joining us. If you're joining us live or if you watch this in the recorded version, we appreciate you for looking it up and for taking the time to watch it, and especially showing your students. And so we're excited this morning to be talking about nuclear energy and nuclear research, and joined by Alli Berry from Abilene Christian University. And want to let her do a more thorough introduction of herself here in a second. But we look forward to hearing what you have to say, Alli Mae, and then we'll have some questions for you along the way as well. And with that, I'll let you have it.
Great, thank you. So a little bit about me. I graduated chemistry from ACU in 2019. While I was a student, I worked for the Next Lab for 6 months, and then I started working for them full time in January of 2020. So I've been here for almost 5 years. I am the chemical analysis systems project lead. I've been that project lead for about 3 years now. And I help supervise the work of 2 staff, 2 faculty, and 4 undergraduate students. So my job as the project lead is just kind of make sure that everything that is happening within my project is running on time, and that things are getting done, or if students need help with something, or if things need to be ordered, those kind of more administrative things, I help with that as well as doing my own. So I'm gonna just kind of, before I jump into more of what I do and kind of what Next Lab is and what ACU is doing in the nuclear space, I'm gonna kind of take a few steps back, just cover kind of what is nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is a form of energy released from the nucleus, which is the core of atoms, and it's made up of protons and neutrons. So there are 2 types of nuclear energy production. One is fission, and that is when a large nucleus splits into smaller nuclei. So you can see in this image here, a neutron hits a large nucleus, causing it to become unstable. So then it splits into 2 different nuclei, and that results in a release of energy. And then the other way is fusion, when small nuclei fuse together. So you can see deuterium and tritium, those are both different forms of hydrogen. When deuterium and tritium fuse together, it's also a little unstable, and so it releases helium and a neutron. So you can see the 2 smaller atoms, 1 proton each, fused into a new atom with 2 protons. So both of those are really high energy processes, and that is what nuclear energy is. So along with nuclear energy comes nuclear reactors. So what are they? They utilize fission process to produce electricity. Fusion reactors are a concept right now and are under a lot of research and development, but there are currently no fusion reactors operating. So if you hear about nuclear reactors, they will all be fission-based reactors. Every reactor within the United States is licensed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or the NRC. So you have to apply for a construction permit and an operating license with the NRC in order to build and then operate your reactor. Commercial reactors use water as the coolant and solid fuel rods, and other designs that maybe use liquid fuel or different liquids as coolants are in development, and some are in different stages within the application process within the NRC as well. The general kind of flow of how a nuclear reactor works is you have your reactor core here, and you've got your solid fuel rods here. So once the fission process begins, becomes a chain reaction. So energy is being produced all the time. So then you use a pump to get the water to carry the heat from the reactor core to the steam generator. Steam is generated, and then it goes into this heat exchanger and turbine generator to generate electricity. So heat generation, heat is carried away from the core over to steam generator to an electricity generator. So why do we need nuclear energy? A lot of electricity available to us, why do we need nuclear? Well, fossil fuels, which is the main workload of our energy here in the US, are becoming depleted, and there's a lot of concern over continued carbon-based fuel usage. If we continue to use coal and natural gas, what's that going to do to the environment? What does that do to the world around us? And wind and solar are other kinds of renewable energies, but they are unpredictable and inconsistent. If the wind stops blowing, or if the wind doesn't blow as hard one day versus another, you can't necessarily predict how much energy that's going to produce from day to day. And then same thing with solar. If the sun stops shining, if it's cloudy that day, or if it's cloudy for a lot of days in a row unexpectedly, that can cause a dip in the electricity production from that. And energy needs are growing rapidly within the US between economic growth, artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, and factors like that. We need something to step into the gaps of fossil fuels and the unpredictability of wind and solar to be a stable source of energy production for the US. So where does Next Lab fit into all of this? Next Lab is a department here at ACU, and it stands for Nuclear Energy Experimental Testing Lab. This is a picture of our new building, the Dillard Science and Engineering Research Center. You can actually see my office in this picture down here. And so this facility has been really incredible to be in. We've been in this for a little over a year now. And so we've got office spaces, we've got lab spaces back here, and then this portion of the building right here is where the reactor will go eventually. We recently got our construction permit from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which was a really big step. So we're working on getting that built, and then we're working on applying for our operating license as well. So we do not have a nuclear reactor yet, but we are in the process of going through the right doors to get that. Next Lab's mission statement is to provide global solutions to the world's need for energy, water, and medical isotopes by advancing the technology of molten salt reactors while educating future leaders in nuclear science and engineering. So really quick, I'm going to talk about molten salt reactors since I haven't talked about that yet, but this is our expertise here at the Next Lab. Very similar to water-cooled reactors in the terms of how the energy is taken and electricity is produced. But instead of solid fuel rods and water, you have the uranium fuel dissolved directly into molten salt, which can be just like table salt, sodium chloride, potassium chloride, melted down to its melting point. No water involved, just heating it up enough to melt the salt itself. The salt we look at the most is fluoride based. So potassium fluoride, lithium fluoride, sodium fluoride, those kind of salts. If you mix them in the right ratios, they melt at a lower temperature than the individual components do on their own. So you have uranium dissolved directly into the salts. So this is where fission still happens because fission requires a very specific geometry of things to be sustained. So you've got fission happening, and then you've got the molten salt being pumped through this loop, and you've got it being pumped into heat exchangers, which then go to turbines to produce electricity. And because the uranium is dissolved directly into the salt, there are fission products in the uranium decay process that are beneficial for medical use. Most notably is technetium-99 metastable, which is an isotope that is the result of the molybdenum-99 decay. So that is used, that's the most, I think, abundantly used isotope in medical diagnostic tests. And there's not currently a supply of that within the United States. So we have to rely on other countries to be able to get that isotope for our medical diagnoses. Molten salt reactors are often nicknamed chemistry reactors because of the, especially liquid fuel designs, because of the salt having the uranium fuel in it and all of those fission products. And it requires real-time monitoring of the salt composition because you're trying to keep track of a lot of things. How much fuel is still in the salt? How much have we burned up? How much has decayed? What is the buildup of fission products? Some are what we call nuclear poisons. They take up those neutrons that cause the fission process So how much of those are in there, or how much oxygen is in there? Is there any moisture or water? Because those, both oxygen and water, lead to massive corrosion in the system. So we want to make sure to minimize that as much as possible and keep an eye on how those concentrations are doing in the salt. So kind of how does Next fit in with that? Our goal here at Next Lab is to begin operation of a molten salt research reactor in 2026. So like I said earlier, we were granted our construction permit in September of this year, which is a huge, huge step. This is the first, I'll make sure I get this right. This is the first liquid fueled molten salt research reactor licensed by the NRC. This is not the first time that this technology has been tested, but in recent years, this is the first one. And there are a few other non-light water reactor designs in front of the NRC right now for licensing, but we are the first for research reactors, which is huge. A huge step in the DOE for the NRC in terms of actually licensing other types of reactors. They have a history of rejecting new reactor designs and only licensing light water reactors. So this is a really big step forward for them as well as for us. They've been really excited to work with us and figure out how can we do this new design safely and do it well. So our hope is to get fuel salt provided by the DOE. Our reactor is designed for 1 megawatt thermal power. One unique thing about research reactors is that they cannot be hooked up to an energy grid, so they cannot be used to generate electricity. Because you are using it for research purposes, you cannot also use it for electricity. So there's two application processes with the NRC. You've got the commercial route and then the university route, and we went the university route. And it will be located on the campus of ACU. So here are a list of the projects that we have here at Next Lab. We have a few different engineering systems over here.
I might interrupt you. On the,
Yeah.
if you'll go back to the other slide real quick. So can you explain what that 1 megawatt thermal, if it's not putting electricity on the grid, what does that mean? What's it doing?
Yeah. So it is still generating the energy that would be converted to electricity, but we're not allowed to, due to all of the regulations, we're not allowed to take that energy and turn it into electricity. We basically just have to vent off the heat, because that's that megawatt thermal is saying that it's generating 1 megawatt of thermal energy, and that is what would be converted to electricity in a commercial setting. But because we're a university research reactor, we are not allowed to turn it into electricity due to regulations. So we're just venting it off. And it's just heat. So it's not radioactive or anything like that. So it'll just get vented.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. So these are some of our engineering projects we've got going on, different test loops to test different instrumentation, testing pumps, flow meters, how do you monitor this stuff? And then we've got our chemistry projects, monitoring, can we get out any medical isotopes? Is there a way to extract those from the salt in the reactor? How do we purify the salt to keep oxygen and water out from what's already in there? And then my project, chemical analysis, monitoring what's in the salt and how much, as well as the other supporting instrumentation and data acquisition that we have going on as well. So now I'm going to get into what I specifically do. So my project is, the goal of my project is to answer two questions. What's in the salt and how much? Those are the key foundational questions of analytical chemistry, which is the specific type of chemistry that I do in my work. And so we also inform procedures and processes that will be used on the Molten Salt Research Reactor, MSRR. I help direct student research and ensure that the project is running on schedule. So some of the challenges and rewards of this job, with a little bit of the background. The first molten salt reactor, the first major experiment was in Oak Ridge, Tennessee in the 1960s. There was another one, the aircraft reactor experiment, I believe in the 50s, if I remember correctly. That was a molten salt reactor, but the majority of the information and data that we have on molten salt reactors is from the molten salt reactor experiment at Oak Ridge. So that was before the NRC was established as an entity, and so that was not licensed by them, which is why I said earlier that it's a really big deal that the NRC has licensed this because they've never licensed any other molten salt reactor before. But since the 60s, we've obviously had a lot of technology advancements, safety advancements, and so there's a lot of things that we need to update or change or modify from the MSRE. That was operated back then. There's also not a lot of knowledge on molten salt chemistry. When you're taught chemistry in school, even in at the college level, you're taught in aqueous solutions. So anything in water or acid or whatever always is aqueous. So all of our instrumentation is designed for aqueous solutions as well. But we don't want to, if we're trying to measure the oxygen in our salt, we don't want to dissolve our salt in water and then analyze it for oxygen because there's oxygen in water. And so that makes your results completely inaccurate. So figuring out how to analyze the salt for all of these various components has been all new and all novel. And people within the molten salt community have been trying to ask these questions and trying to answer them of, okay, how do we monitor things in the salt in real time? How do we verify those measurements? How do we get a standard procedure for this, something that we can use that's reliable, that we know we can count on to say, okay, this is where our reactor's at with this. This is the fuel level. This is the oxygen content, whatever that looks like. So then the NRC knows, okay, this is operating within the safe range. So that's a massive challenge exploring this whole new area of chemistry and this whole new area of kind of nuclear chemistry in general. And so it's really rewarding when you start to figure things out and you collaborate with a lot of people across the molten salt community. The molten salt community is getting larger, but it is still pretty small. So a lot of us are pretty familiar with each other and are able to collaborate together to figure out, okay, you have this thing that I would like to use, or I know you have that, and I have this, so let's swap data or let's try to do experiments on each other's systems, or I'd love to know what challenges you had in running this experiment or setting the system up. So it's a really great time for collaboration, and that working together is really rewarding, as well as being able to answer some of those questions. So kind of going into more of what the nuclear industry is looking like right now, I, of course, will be talking mostly about molten salt reactor specifically, because that's what I'm most familiar with. But the nuclear industry in general is constantly changing and growing. There's always new information coming out, new data, new reactor designs that people are like, hey, if we change this thing, what does that look like? How does that impact things? And there's a lot of opportunities for careers in a variety of disciplines. Nuclear tends to have, if you look at it from the outside in, you kind of see, okay, it's just a bunch of engineers and scientists. And yes, those are the vast majority of jobs, but there are a lot of different opportunities for people to work in the nuclear industry. Administrative, accounting and budget, attorneys, investigators, information technology, as well as engineers and scientists. We need everybody, all hands on deck, to be able to get this technology ready and viable to be able to be commercialized, to be able to put on the US energy grid so that we can start using that electricity and getting that technology available to be used to bless the world. And nuclear isn't going away. You hear it all the time in news about, oh, well, we have these large energy needs, especially with AI really taking off. You hear about these big companies like Google and Amazon wanting to support nuclear power because they know that that is a really great way to generate a lot of electricity, which they need for all of their systems. So nuclear isn't going away. This industry is not going to die off. So it's a great place to get started. you have a bachelor's degree, it is easy to kind of go and do what you want to do, especially in the natural science fields like chemistry and it's hard. A lot of the work that you would potentially want to do, you have to get either a master's or a PhD or some kind of advanced degree past a bachelor's. But in nuclear, there are a lot of opportunities for people with just bachelor's degrees. And of course, there's also a lot of opportunities if you decide to go get another graduate degree. There are a lot of opportunities for those as well. But so you have a lot of choice with once you have a bachelor's, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to keep going and get a master's, or do I want to keep going and get a PhD? Or do I just want to enter the workforce after that? And there's routes for all of those available. So one of the big areas within nuclear industry is obviously research. Understanding how do all these things play in, how do they play together, how do these affect things. So the Department of Energy has a lot of grant funding opportunities that they send out requests for applications for essentially. So just to kind of show the breadth of what nuclear research could look like, I've included a lot of some of the topics that the DOE is interested in funding because those are huge questions within the nuclear industry itself. Nuclear nonproliferation, nuclear forensics, fusion, reactor development, and plant optimization, optimizing the existing nuclear plants that are in operation right now. How can we update that technology that's hasn't really been touched in the last 50, 60, 70 years? How do we take that and change it and upgrade it to make them more optimal? Nuclear fuel recycle technologies, fuels themselves. You don't necessarily have to use uranium as a fuel, as your reactor fuel. That's just what's been done. So there are other isotopes and other elements that might be useful for that. Fuel disposal, storage and transportation, modeling and simulation. That is a really key one in accident prediction. Kind of, okay, what is the worst case scenario if this reactor were to do X? What would be the result? Modeling and simulation are really big and important in those. Measuring, monitoring, and controls. That's where a lot of my interest comes in. Measuring what's in the reactor, what's in the salt, monitoring those oxygen levels, and kind of figuring out, okay, how do we, if the oxygen level is starting to get too high, how do we go into the salt and figure out a way to bring that down? Licensing, safety, and security, as well as advanced nuclear materials. Most nuclear reactors have used the same type of metal, the same materials, but if we want to use a different material, how does that work? How does that look with radiation? How does that look exposed to the heat and all of those different things? So material sciences are another really important factor within this industry. So some of the key players within nuclear that would be great places to look for internships with or jobs with. There's kind of the three big overall groups: government, university, and industry. Within government, you have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So they do a lot of the licensing. There's a lot of scientists that work there just to say, okay, this company submitted their license application and they claim this. Is this reasonable? Let me do some experiments and some research to figure out if that's a reasonable thing. So there's a lot of technical background as well as licensing, kind of more of the what am I trying to say? Kind of more of the paperwork side. Okay, how do we get this license? How do we regulate this? As well as needing accounting and budget, because those play a huge role in the license application process. The Department of Energy has a huge range of jobs in a lot of fields, as well as national labs across the US. So I've only listed four here. These are kind of the biggest four players in nuclear, but a lot of other national labs do nuclear related work as well. Oak Ridge National Lab in Tennessee, Los Alamos National Lab in New Mexico, Argonne National Lab in Illinois, and Idaho National Lab in Idaho. Those are four of the biggest players within the nuclear industry, but there are, of course, others as well. Universities, of course, ACU, UC Berkeley, Wisconsin, MIT, UT, A&M, Tennessee, Idaho, Michigan, New Mexico. All of these universities have really good programs within nuclear engineering and nuclear science, and would be wonderful places to go to college if you're interested in that, or to get an advanced degree if you're interested in those as well. So some industry ones, Natural Resources, they are our funding partners here at ACU for the next lab. So their goal is to commercialize molten salt reactor technology. So they are funding us to be able to kind of have lessons learned from our reactor so that can inform their reactor design and operation. Terra Power, Kairos Power, Westinghouse Electric, Terrestrial Energy, and X Energy. All of those are really big names within the nuclear industry and have also a wide variety of jobs available to them for internships as well as jobs post school. Kind of to wrap it all up, nuclear energy is a critical technology for the future of our world. We're not going to be able to sustain the technology advancements that we want to do, electric vehicles, AI, um, or become carbon free. That is a huge goal of a lot of major companies like Amazon and Google, Microsoft, all those kind of places. They want to be carbon zero net. I think the proper terminology is net carbon zero. A lot of them are saying by 2050, and that is not going to happen without nuclear technology. This industry has a wide array of jobs in research areas. So if you're interested in research, you could close your eyes and throw a dart and hit something, and it's all interesting and fascinating. And even if you're not interested in research, there's a lot of other jobs that you could plug into that would be really are really necessary for this industry to thrive. New information on different technologies is found every single day. And so there's a lot of new challenges with unique rewards. Not very many people are doing this kind of work. Depending on, of course, where area you're looking at. If you're looking at fusion, there's a set of people that are looking at that, molten salt reactors. But everything is new. How do we optimize things? How do we create this new technology? How do we test these new materials? There's a lot of new challenges, and it's really rewarding when you can finally figure something out. Or even if you figure out, okay, we know this doesn't work, that's a great step in the right direction as well. And the nuclear industry needs students to enter undergraduate programs to later enter the workforce. Because this technology is not going away, the need for people to enter the nuclear workforce is going to continue to be relevant, prevalent, and continue to grow as well as these technologies hopefully become commercialized. We'll need plant operators and people to be involved in just the maintaining of the safety of these reactors, as well as researching different areas of that. So here's some references, and just want to say thank y'all so much. I've really enjoyed talking about this. I really love my job. I love the work that we're doing, and I love getting to be a part of the nuclear industry in general.
Alli, man, we appreciate you being with us this morning. I really appreciate the way that you brought in the vastness of the careers that are associated with nuclear, from control monitoring, controls, to all sorts of research. And so if you're inclined to want to do research, nuclear would definitely be a way to go based on what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
You made a point. You also mentioned the fact that you can do a whole lot without a graduate degree. So you've got a degree in chemistry, and you're working alongside, professors there and doing research. You're directing student research as well from students at ACU. Can you talk a little bit more about that, about the opportunities, entry level and beyond, just with your bachelor's degree?
Yeah. So in undergrad, I really felt like my options were either go to med school or go to grad school in some area of research. And I just really wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew it wasn't med school. That is not for me. but I wasn't sure what kind of grad school I wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to do school anymore. I was just at a point in my life where I was tired of being in school and I wanted a break from studying and testing and all of that. Um, and so I was really thankful to be able to get this job. But the more I've been in this job, the more that I have found there are definitely opportunities for entry level, or even if you have a bachelor's with experience, there's a lot of other jobs that are higher than entry level. So I know in particular national labs need scientists, and so they have positions specifically for people with bachelor's, and of course they'll hire people with graduate degrees as well. But that was something that took me by surprise whenever I started looking at just kind of learning about the nuclear industry and kind of figuring out what that industry looks like and what does the workforce look like. Because I was under the impression that you had to have a master's or a PhD to be able to do research. And there are, of course, more opportunities if you have a PhD or a master's, but there are a wide variety of opportunities with just a bachelor's as well to kind of do whatever area of research you're interested in.
And you made the comment just then that having a bachelor's degree and then being a scientist. So you can be a scientist with a bachelor's degree. You can do
Yes.
scientific research with a bachelor's degree.
Mhm.
Graduate degrees are great. Not saying anything,
Yeah,
against those at all. I think they're wonderful. But sometimes, as you were thinking, maybe I don't want to do that because I don't want to get an advanced degree. Well, 10 years down the road, you might, 5 years down the road, you might, or you might not. Doesn't matter. Either way, you can go into this field. And so I think that's
absolutely.
good for kids to know.
Yeah.
Uh, I appreciate your talking about the different, the types of nuclear energy generation and experimental, all of that. It seems like in the United States we feel like it's very, very dangerous. Um,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of folks have been doing some work, or at least some folks have been doing some work to try to alleviate those fears. Um, I think I think it's safe to say that nuclear energy in America is safer than anywhere else in the world because of the regulations that we have,
Yeah.
and maybe the healthy fear of of the catastrophic. And so we really haven't had, other than 3 Mile Island, we haven't had any events in the States. And that one was, it could have been worse. It was contained. So,
Yeah.
um, and that was 70, what, late 70s. Um,
Yeah.
so it's been a while. Uh,
Hmm.
and we've got nuclear facilities right here in Texas. And then also you mentioned ACU, Texas, A&M, and University of Texas as being schools that are doing nuclear research and have nuclear
Hmm.
programs. So if a student, a lot of these are going to be Texas students that see this video. If they want to stay right here in Texas and be in this field, they've got opportunities with 3 different universities there. So
Yeah.
all very good and very interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. I just want to bring this slide up really quick. I just had some extra slides in case people were curious about different things. But nuclear power is by far the safest form of energy. Even considering the Chernobyl, Fukushima, 3 Mile Island accidents like that, that get a lot of press. Even considering those, nuclear is by far the safest form of energy. There's a lot of accidents that and incidents that happen in coal and oil. You just don't hear about them as much. And so considering all of the different forms of energy, these are each dot is 100 death per thousand terawatt hours generated of electricity. And you can see nuclear is 90 compared to 100,000 for coal. So even considering those accidents, which are obviously terrible, and we've learned a lot from them in terms of how do we keep those accidents from happening. Even considering all of that, nuclear is by far the safest form of energy production.
Very, very interesting. And so
Mhm.
are these workplace deaths, I guess? Or is that,
Um, yes.
yeah, interesting. All right.
Workplace and
Well,
then also, sorry, workplace as well as just kind of related to like things that happen as a byproduct of that energy production.
right.
So down here, there's a statistic about air pollution in China and how many people that kills. So that plays a factor into the coal related or the coal
Okay, right.
statistic.
This is very interesting. So yeah, it's good to know, and more
Hmm.
people need to know that it is safe.
Yeah.
Um, I'm interested in fusion because that has been related to powering vehicles.
Hmm.
And so that is very interesting to me as well. So if a student is watching this and wants to, work in a new field of nuclear, such as fusion, I say it's new because we don't have it. It's not a
Hmm.
commercial, not being
Yeah.
used commercially.
Yeah.
And uh, if you're science minded and curious and want to do research, it looks like nuclear is wide open for you, and we need
Yeah.
people doing it. So anyway.
Absolutely.
Well, Allie Mae, thank you so much for
Yeah.
being with us, and we'll probably call on you again, and maybe you can present in the future for us as well.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love that. And of course, if there are any questions, please feel free to send me an email, and I'd be happy to answer your question or find a better resource to answer it better than I could.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.